Before you begin, if you picked up this book expecting it to be light and easy, well, it's not that kind of story. It's raw, it's real, it has hope, and it's mine. I talk about Jesus, weed, healing, and a few things that might make some people uncomfortable. I cuss a little, laugh when it doesn't always seem appropriate, and promise to be as honest as I can without the authorities being called on me. You don't have to believe like me to read this. You don't even have to agree with me. But if you've ever been knocked down and had to find your way back up, you might find a piece of yourself somewhere in these pages. Throughout this book, I mention moments that I later return to with more honesty and understanding. Some are painful, some are redemptive, and some are redemptive. I didn't write the story in order. I wrote it as I remembered it and how healing actually happens. People have asked me, Desiree, wouldn't it have been easier not to remember? Maybe, but easier doesn't always heal. From ages 2 to 8, pieces of my life were tucked so far away that I didn't start remembering them until 2017. That first memory hit me like a freight train, and I didn't see it coming. The rest didn't start pouring out until after I healed from my second breast surgery. Like my body and mind finally teamed up and said, all right, girl, you're safe. It's time to unpack the box. If you're still reading, thank you for staying. All I ask is that you read with an open hands and open hearts, because the back roads of my life are bumpy and messy, sometimes hilarious and sometimes heartbreaking. But every twist and turn leads me back to my back porch, where my truth finally gets to breathe. And you're on my back porch where I was doing a lot of breathing. Meet me on my back porch. There's something honest about a back porch, something freeing about a road. Both are places where life slows down just enough for you to catch your breath, to pause, and to decide which way to go next. They're where truth shows up, quite raw and uninvited, and if you sit still long enough, you can almost hear your heart excel. It's where the noise fades, just enough for you to hear your own thoughts. It's where deep breaths come easier. Where your coffee cools slower and time, if only for a moment, feels like it might actually be on your side. That's where I'm inviting you to meet me. Not in a church pew, not in a therapist's office, not at a podium with answers neatly pressed and ready, but here on my back porch where I've cried, prayed, cussed, laughed, and talked about everything from raising kids to finding myself again after life flipped the script. 18 years of homeschooling my kids taught me patience, grit, and how to improvise when the lesson plan or life went sideways. Somewhere along the line, after trauma, therapy, hormones that completely lost their minds, and discovering that a little weed can quiet the noise better than anything else I've tried. I learned to to lighten up, to laugh more, to stop trying to fix everything all the time, and just let life be what it is. Beautiful, messy, and mine. I sat on this porch with friends, swapping stories about the chaos of motherhood and the mystery of middle age, realizing that life doesn't stop handing out lessons. It just changes subjects. Sometimes we laugh our way through them, sometimes we limp, but we keep showing up. What I've learned about pain is that it changes form. It doesn't stay where it started. It seeps into how you see yourself, how you show up in relationships, how long you stare at a text before hitting send. It can silence you without saying a word. And yet, healing has its own stubborn way of showing up, too. It creeps in through honest conversations, small wins, held hands, and yes, sometimes even through writing a book that scares the hell out of you. Healing isn't tidy, it's messy, funny, exhausting, and worth every second of work it takes. This isn't a book about blame, it's not about revenge or regret, it's about taking my life back. It's about going back and gathering all the pieces of me I left behind on sidewalks and church pews, in old bedrooms in new cities, and finally letting them come home. I've walked through seasons where I didn't know if I'd ever feel whole, and even now, wholeness feels more like a practice than a destination. But I know this much. I'm not the same woman I was when the road first cracked open in 2017. I've spent decades learning how to carry grief in one hand and joy in the other, without dropping myself in the process. And still, some mornings, I wake up and forget what I know. Some nights I reach for old habits like that clear, familiar blanket. But more often than not, I remember. I remember who I am. I remember that voice is mine now. My body is mine. My story, mine to tell. This book won't give you a linear timeline. It won't tie up every thread in it with a bow. What it will do is walk you down the roads I've taken, the cracked ones, the back roads, the forgotten paths that still led somewhere. You'll meet the girl who didn't know she was drowning, the teenager who found her voice in the wrong places, the woman who rebuilt herself again and again, and the mother who tried to give her kids something better, even when she felt like she was still broken. There's no guidebook for the kind of life I've lived, but maybe, just maybe, these pages will be a flashlight for someone else's dark night. Maybe something in here will sit with you like a friend who doesn't need you to be okay. So here I am. I pulled up a chair. The porch light is on. The road stretches out ahead. I'm telling it all, not because I have to, but because I finally can. And maybe if you're carrying something heavy too, you'll find a little light on this road to guide you to your place of healing and peace. We weren't made to walk it alone. The road to here. Before I ever wondered who I was or why I felt so different, I was just a kid with a spark and a whole lot of questionable ideas I was more than willing to test out on the world. I didn't have a plan, but I had fire. And when you're 5 years old with fire in your belly and nobody explaining the rules in a language your little ears can fully hear, you make your own rules. You follow your own compass. And even if it spins a little crooked, sorry, I'm going to take some. I wasn't a wild child. I was just wired differently. Curious, determined, blunt, fiercely loyal, and full of heart. People loved me because I was adorable in my own lopsided way. Tiny pigtails, Coke bottle glasses that magnified my eyes to cartoon size. A lisp that turned every word into something worth smiling at. And a bounce in my step that made it hard to stay mad at me for long. I was curious to a fault, always in motion, always asking questions I probably shouldn't. And even at that age, I knew I could be a little much. Cute and slightly annoying, a combination that somehow worked for me. Some kids followed the path laid out for them. I was the kid on the side trail, collecting shiny rocks and climbing things I probably shouldn't. The one with chocolate on her face, questions in her mouth, and scraped up knees. And even when things around me didn't make sense, when the adults weren't paying attention, and when love came in strange shapes in short supply, I was still out there, turning over stones, pushing boundaries, and making my own kind of sense. The truth is, I didn't grow up with clear answers. I grew up with contradictions. I had loud laughter and quiet sadness. I had moments of deep safety and stretches of being completely on my own. Emotionally, spiritually, and sometimes physically, I was seen and unseen, cherished and overlooked all at once. But what I always had, was the will to keep going. The will to find something good, even in the middle of the mess. That's the core of who I've always been. This book isn't just about trauma, healing, faith, marriage, motherhood, or even loss, though it's all of those things. It's about what it means to walk through life, lose your way, while finding a way back to yourself. Back to joy, back to love, back to peace, even if it's just moments. Back to God, but not the God I was spoon-fed in childhood, the one I found in the quiet places, on back roads, on back porches, in the middle of heartbreak, in the middle of laughter, in the middle of being fully and perfectly me. Sometimes the roads we travel run side by side. Two different paths that somehow lead to the same place. I've learned that more than one road can be right at the same time. One might be straight and familiar, the other rough and full of detours. But if you pay attention, they'll both teach you something about grace, about timing, and about home, how home isn't a single destination, it's the place where your road finally meets. You won't find a straight line in these pages. What you'll find is the road, the real one, and it's mine. Winding and wide open, cracked and full of beauty, with pit stops, potholes, a few crashes, and a handful of grace. You'll find the people who helped carry me, the ones who left me there bleeding. You'll find stories that will make you laugh out loud, and others that might make you want to set something on fire. Please don't. And if you see parts of yourself in these pages, especially the messy parts, I hope you know this. You are not broken. You are not too much. You're just on your road, and it's okay if it looks nothing like other people's. This is mine. These are the back roads and the back porches that led me here. Part 1. The Roads of Childhood. The in-between. I was nearly 2 years old when my world finally came into focus. I sat cross-legged in front of our fish tank for the first time in my life. My mom said my nose practically pressed against the glass, staring like I'd just discovered buried treasure. I had just gotten my first pair of glasses, giant, round, and Coke bottle lenses that I swallowed my little face. And for the first time, I realized we had fish. Real living, swimming fish that had been there all along. I was blind as a bat. I sat there for hours, mesmerized. It wasn't that I didn't know if the tank was there. I just hadn't seen it. Not really. For almost 2 years, the world had been a soft blur. Faces were shapes. Love was tone and touch. Life existed in the fuzzy outlines, and I didn't even know what I was missing. And then suddenly I saw. That moment says everything about my childhood. So much of it was like that, blurry until it wasn't. Things happening all around me, things I could feel but not name. And when they finally came into view, they hit hard. Like spotting fish that had been swimming beside you the whole time, unseen but always there. No one chooses the road they were born on to. We just show up mid-scene in a story. Some land in the middle of love that wraps around us like a warm blanket. Some land in chaos. And some of us, we land somewhere in between, soft in places, sharp in others, and never quite making sense of everywhere else. I was born into the in-between. I was the third girl of the Turnell sisters, the surprise, the unexpected. And if you've ever been the unexpected one, you know it doesn't always feel magical. Sometimes it feels like showing up to a party no one planned for you. You walk in smiling, trying to act like you belong, but deep down you know there's no seat at the table yet. You have to pull up your own chair and pour your own drink. When I was born, the doctor announced, "It's a girl!" My mom cried. And not the sweet, overwhelming, with love kind of tears. They were more like, "Oh, damn, not another girl." But she didn't cuss, so it was probably just silence and a heavy sigh. She wanted a boy. I grew up knowing that. Not because she said it over and over, but because he was just there, lingering, tucked in the moments, and glances and jokes that weren't really jokes. And then as if you being unexpected was dramatic enough, I decided to cause a scene before I even left the nursery. My two grandfathers were standing outside the window looking in at me, probably trying to make sense of yet another girl joining the mix, when they noticed I was turning blue. And panic set in, nurses were called, my grandfathers placed their hands on that nursery window and started praying right then and there. The story goes they wouldn't stop. They wouldn't stop, just prayed. Okay, sorry, they like moved without me. It turned the page. Panic set in. Nurses were called. My grandfathers placed their hands on the nursery window and started praying right then and there. The story goes they wouldn't stop. Just prayed and cried and begged heaven to hold on to me. And I believed it did. And I believe it did. I came into this world knowing how to fight, even before I had words. I was already pushing through, refusing to give up, even if no one had made space for me. I was going to make my own space. I was a fighter from the beginning. I wasn't unloved. I was very much loved. But it didn't always feel that way. And feelings, they are tricky like that. That kind of shadow, being the one they didn't expect, sticks to you in quiet ways, like being the only one missing from the photo, or hearing your name followed by a sigh, or being told to just be quiet for a minute again. But those weren't the only shadows. There were others, darker, heavier, the kind that settle over a child's life long before she knows how to name them. Things no child should have to carry. Back then, I couldn't have explained them. I didn't have the language, but I knew the feeling, a sudden shrinking inside, an instinct to fold myself up small, a need to disappear before anyone noticed too much. I learned how to scan a room before stepping into it, to decide if I could breathe there or need to stay on guard. At this time, I thought it was just my personality, this careful, watchful way of moving through the world. Later, I'd understand it for what it really was. Survival training I never signed up for. Taught long before I could tie my own shoes. I was a curious kid. Loud, as in I never shut up. It followed me still. Constantly asking why before I agreed to anything. That kind of kid who made Sunday school teachers second guess their calling, and regular school teachers, Lord bless them. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I just didn't know how to fit inside the boxes. They were too small for me. I felt things big. I asked too many questions. I noticed everything in it and didn't know how to hide it. And to top it off, I was nearly blind, hard of hearing, and had a speech impediment. Between the glasses, the questions, and the sugar I consumed daily, I was a lot. A lovable lot, but still a lot. And yes, I always ate too much candy, to the point that my teeth were literally rotting. Sugar was comfort, control, my personal stash of sweetness in a world that didn't always feel soft. I probably had cavities in the teeth I hadn't even grown yet. I was also a world-class hider. Closets, cabinets, under beds, you name it. If it had a door, I was behind it. My mom always said I could vanish like magic at any family gathering. One time during a dinner party, she went searching for me and my little friend, boyfriend, and found us tucked in a closet. She opened the door, looked at me with that mom face, and said, "Now, Desiree, what are you doing?" Innocently, the jury is still out. Looking up at her with a stare, I answered, "I eat a peanut." Not a typo, that's how I said it. And then I kiss him. I eat another peanut, and then I kiss him again. I was 5. What can I say? I liked boys early and peanuts.
I think he was allergic. Yeah, no doubt.
I liked the idea of being independent before I could even tie my shoes or ride a bike. Determined was a polite word for it. The truth, I was just plain stubborn. Once I set my mind to something, there was no talking me out of it, especially if it meant proving I could do what the grown-ups did. Case in point, I was 4 when I decided I was going to make my own food. Johnny. I was 4 when I decided I was going to make my own food. My cousin Jamie and I were out in Terlingua, where our families went hunting. If you've ever been out there, you know. It's the kind of place where the dirt sticks under your nails, the wind never stops blowing, and when the sun drops, and that desert cold cuts straight through you when the sun fades. But we figured if the adults could do it, so could we. Armed with a .22 rifle, yep, people actually trusted kids with those back then, and the kind of confidence only kids have, we went rabbit hunting. Before long, we had one. Feeling mighty proud, we skinned it, hung it up like we'd seen the Elmo. We skinned it, hung it up like we had seen the grown-ups do with the deer. And the next day, we cut off the meat, threw it in a cast iron skillet over the fire. Now, you might be thinking, that's impressive for a 4 and 6-year-old. And it might have been, if it hadn't been completely disgusting. No butter, no seasoning, nothing but sad, gray chunks of boiled rabbit floating in water. I still remember to this day. One bite was all it took for me to decide I was done. Jamie ate his because We've been taught if you kill it, you eat it. But I spit mine right out. We might have been tough little West Texas kids, but no amount of grit could make that rabbit taste right. Saved by a Pringles can. And there was the time I tried to save a soul with a Pringles can. Some kids play house, some kids collect bugs, and then there was me, my cousin Jamie, my accomplice in all my big adventures and memories, convinced me that we were on a mission to save a neighbor's soul from eternal damnation. We lived in a fourplex in Fairbanks, Alaska, with a rooftop balcony above us, where our neighbor was growing a little garden, not of vegetables, but of marijuana. my cousin always the idea man convinced me that it was our mission to get rid of the devil's leaves he was growing in his nefarious rooftop. So I'm sorry, this is a funny story. So like the two tiny vigilantes, we snuck onto the rooftop while he was out, plucked every last bit of his contraband, and stuffed it into an empty Pringles can. We then weighed them down with rocks, took a nice stroll to the local leech-filled pond, where we launched the cans into the depths of its belly. Problem solved, soul saved. Except that the neighbor didn't exactly see it that way. When he realized his entire stash was gone, he stormed downstairs, yelling at our dads, demanding to know what happened. Of course, my cousin took the blame. Everyone already knew he was the mastermind behind most of our trouble. But I stood right there beside him, a 5-year-old accomplice, certain we had done the right thing. Looking back, maybe that was part of the same instinct I'd been quietly sharpening since I was little. Scanning for danger, deciding who was saved and who needed saving, even if it got wildly wrong sometimes. The long road to a little confidence. Let's fast forward to 6th grade. I traded pigtails for a little more sass, a lot more confidence. By then, I like to think of myself as pretty tough. Quick with a comeback, fast with my feet when I needed to be. I wasn't scared of much. But there were still a few people who could cut straight through that moment. One of them was this kid from school, a mean little shit, who seemed to wake up every morning thinking, how can I ruin Desiree's day? He didn't just pick on me. He stalked me like it was his personal sport. One afternoon, I was riding my bike home when I heard it, the sharp, ugly sound of metal clinking behind me. I glanced over my shoulder, and there he was, pedaling hard, swinging a heavy chain. Before I could swerve, the chain cracked across my face, knocking my glasses clean off. I remember watching them fly, skidding across the pavement. Later, when I picked them up, I saw the chip in the lens, a permanent reminder of that day. I wasn't mad. I was just sad. Glasses were expensive, and we didn't have money for another pair. Those glasses were my lifeline, and now they were damaged. And yeah, I was scared too, not just because of what he did, but because I knew there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. I never told my parents. I just took the long way home from then on. Not because I was weak, but because I wasn't stupid. Some fights aren't worth it. Survival isn't about winning. It's about knowing how to keep going. It's about I'd been in that training program for years, always reading the signs, figuring out when to stand my ground and when to take the long way home. And I always did. I wore those busted glasses with that chip in the lens until the day I was out at my cousin's house. We were riding his homemade we were riding his homemade go-kart, one of those rattling contraptions pieced together from what... Oh, hey! Come join us! Here.
Sweet.
Here.
I didn't want to intervene.
Come on.
Okay, thank you. Or I can sit here. Let me grab her book shirt.
You're getting into the stories.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh. I wasn't mad. I was just sad. Glasses were expensive, and we didn't have the money. I just took the long way home from then on. Not because I was weak, but because I wasn't stupid. Some fights Art worth it. Survival isn't about winning. It's about knowing how to keep going. I'd been in that training program for years, always reading the signs, figuring out when to stand my ground and when to take a long ways home. And I always did. Okay, sorry. I wore those best glasses with that chip in the lens until the day I was at my cousin's house. We were riding in his homemade go-kart, one of those rattling contraptions, pieced together from whatever scraps were lying around. I was hanging on to the back when he slammed on the brakes. Next thing I knew, I was airborne. I landed hard, and those already battered glasses didn't survive. I picked them up, bent and broken, and my dad just looked at me and said, "Well, I guess it's time to get contacts." I could have hugged him right then. Finally, no more four eyes. With those contacts came a little more confidence, which I was going to need for what came next. But even in the chaos of it all, feeling too much, seeing too little, sugar high and hiding, I wasn't totally alone. Not completely. There were people who saw me, even if they didn't always understand me. There were places that felt like refuge, porches, creeks, the patch of shade under a big oak tree, the corners of noisy rooms where nobody noticed I was quietly paying attention. And then there were moments, small, fleeting, where I felt held, even just for a second. That's the thing about childhood. It's not just one thing, it's layers. Some are clear, some are cloudy, some are loud and messy, others are so quiet they almost slip by unnoticed. And the road you're born into, it may be cracked, confusing, wild, but eventually you'll learn how to walk it. Sometimes barefoot, sometimes sideways.
Barefoot and sideways.
Sideways. I know. And then born into a crack. Sideways. Okay. Oh. Okay. But you walk it. And if you're lucky, you find a place or a person that gives you just enough breath to keep going. A pause in the chaos, a soft place to land. Those became my safe havens, and I'll never forget them. The roots that held me. If I could bottle up, now this is probably, there's gonna be tears. If I could bottle up the feelings of home, it wouldn't be the house I grew up in. That was always changing. It would be my grandmama and granddad Turnell's porch on a slow summer's afternoon. I'm little, legs sticking straight out because they don't reach the step below, sitting on the top porch, step with a dented metal bowl in my lap, snapping green beans. Grandmama is next to me, humming a hymn so soft it almost blends in the buzz of the cicadas, sorry. Every so often the wind moves through her flowers, and I swear even the marigolds pause to listen. She doesn't say much. She never had to. Her presence says everything I need to hear. You're wanted here. You belong here. The world can spin and break out there. But here, you can breathe. Her house wasn't fancy, but it was steady. It had a rhythm that made sense. The garden out back was always alive with something growing. The kitchen always carried the smell of life, fresh tomatoes on the counter, bread rising in a dish towel, and a faint trace of morning coffee. Grandmama didn't just grow vegetables, she grew a sense of belonging. Her way of loving was quiet, but it went all the way to the bone. She never preached, she didn't need to. She worked, she nurtured, she hummed. She taught me to tend without words, how to soften the soil, watch for new growth, and trust that patience brings life. Granddad was the other side of the world, big, booming, and unforgettable. His laugh could shake the walls, and his voice in prayer seemed to rise straight to heaven. It startled me sometimes, but the second he pulled me into his lap, all that sound became comfort. His arms were a fortress. His chest was a drumbeat I could lean on. He loved telling stories, and I hung on every word. I can still hear him talking about one of our ancestors, a Texas Ranger who worked alongside the Choctaw people and fell in love with one of the little women there, as he said with a grin. She became part of our family line. Then came the story that still gives me goosebumps. He said that one Sunday, in a tiny Nazarene church in Placid, Texas, a little white girl stood up and began to worship fluent Choctaw. She had never spoken a word of it yet before, yet there was praising and language of the ancestors that he said was the day our family came to know Jesus. Even as a kid, I felt the power in that story. The way faith, connection, and history were all braided together in one beautiful moment. Their house didn't have a TV, but it had treasures, stacks of National Geographic magazines. I'd sprawl on the rug, flipping through the glossy pages, staring at the faces from around the world. People who looked nothing like me, living lives I couldn't imagine. Maybe that's where my love for stories began, right there in their living room, with the smell of bread baking and the sense I was safe enough to dream beyond my own little world. Even now, when life gets too loud, I go there in my mind. I feel the rough porch step under my legs. I smell the bread in the oven. I hear Grandmama humming and Granddad laughing. I place those people. They were my roots. They held me steady when nothing else could, and I carry them with me still. Hiding in plain sight. Before I ever understood what I was doing, I was hiding. Not out of rebellion or mischief, but out of instinct. I had a whole rotation of secret spots behind the couch, tucked in closets, wedged beneath the bed. That space under the bed was my favorite. It felt like my own secret world, where shadows offered shelter and silence didn't ask questions. I think I even got in trouble a few times for disappearing too often. But I wasn't trying to be bad. I was just trying to breathe, to find a space where I didn't feel like I was in the way. When the quiet corners weren't enough, I built my own. I imagined new worlds where I was the mom, the protector, the one who stayed. I clung to anyone who gave me a scrap of attention, sometimes good people, sometimes not. I thought kindness meant safety. It took me a long time to learn that wasn't always true. There was this dog, Christy, big red hair you could pull long or short. I mothered her the way I had seen it done, fed her invisible bottles, tucked her in tight, made her little home out of blankets and leftover boxes. We had picnics on the carpet and adventures in the quiet corners of my mind. The old shed in the backyard became our castle, our church, our store, whatever I needed it to be. We made mud pies, carved out hillside beds, and built entire towns with cousins and neighborhood kids. None of it lasted past the next rain, but in those fleeting moments, I felt free. Even now, I know it wasn't just pretend. Wasn't just play. It was survival. I was creating a space where I could belong, a place that made more sense than the one I had been handed. I didn't always feel unseen, but maybe I was. Or maybe that's just how it was in the 70s and 80s. We were all latchkey kids, all a little forgotten. We let ourselves in after school, made our own snacks, and knew better than to interrupt the adults unless someone was bleeding. None of my friends had helicopter parents. We were the generation of figuring it out. We existed in the gaps. My mama. My mama was magnetic. Not in the try hard, look at me way, but effortlessly, jaw droppingly magnetic. Stunningly beautiful, incredibly talented at just about everything she touched. She lit up a room when she walked in, and I swear, even now, nearing 80, she still does. There was always laughter around her, loud, full belly, throw your head back laughter. She was the woman with the bold lipstick or no makeup at all, whichever fit the moment. She didn't just host holidays, she produced them. Our living room could have passed for a Southern living spread during Christmas. There were lights strung everywhere, candles flickering over the surface, and gifts that somehow made you feel like she had read your soul. She was the kind of mom who gave me the birds and bees talk while driving to Polar Bear Ashburns for ice cream. Y'all remember that? Mid scoot, mid shot. She thought it was hilarious to hire an Air Force stripper for my 18th birthday. I was slightly embarrassed, but also thrilled. I mean, who doesn't love a man in uniform? She had a way of making even the weirdest and most awkward moment into a story people would repeat for years. That was her magic. Warm, generous, unforgettable, a little chaotic, a little wild, and always bold. But behind all that sparkle, there was also sadness. I still remember the day I came home from kindergarten and found her passed out on the stairs. It was the first time I saw my mama completely undone. And even though I didn't have the words back then, something in me knew not everything was okay. Even as a little girl, I could feel it. That subtle tension in the air. That buzzing undercurrent that made me study the room, measure people's moods before I spoke. I don't think I ever truly relaxed. Not all the way. I didn't feel fully seen, fully safe, or fully settled. There was love. I never doubted that. But I didn't always know where I fit inside the beautiful, chaotic world she created. Maybe that's when the real hiding started, not in the closets or behind the furniture, but inside myself. I clung to the laughter and the lights, but I also became skilled at holding my breath through the parts that felt too unpredictable. Now, when I look back, I carry both sides of that childhood, the joy and the ache, the magic and the tension. The stories we told at the table and the silence I learned to sit and alone, because even with all that beauty, home wasn't a place where I could fully excel. My daddy. My daddy was quiet. Not the gruff, mean kind of quiet, just off in his own world most of the time or away working. I don't have a ton of memories of him being around when I was little, but I do have one that stuck. I was 7 and still riding a bike with training wheels. The teasing had already started. Kids can be cruel when they smell your insecurity. But that day, he knelt, adjusted the seat, held the back, and said, "You're ready." He ran alongside me, hands steady, until he wasn't there anymore. I was riding on my own, and when I looked back and saw him smiling, it felt like more than just balance. I had his attention just for a moment. I had him. But life didn't offer many of those moments. I remember my 12th birthday, and the strawberry cake never even made it to the table. My parents got into a fight, and that pretty pink cake ended up painting the ceiling with pink icing and sweet cake. That image burned into my memory like a metaphor, and not long after my 12th birthday, things shifted again. We were sitting in my parents' bedroom, my 2 sisters and I. I don't remember my mom being there, but I can still see the desk. That desk was up in the corner, and that's where he was when he told us he was leaving. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just said this. Just said it. As a matter of fact, like it was something. Johnny. He just said it. As a matter of fact, like it was something simple. Like it wouldn't shatter us. When the words settled into the room like dust, I stood up and walked out the front door. I didn't make a scene. I didn't ask questions. I just wandered the neighborhood and cried until my chest hurt. I was 12 and my heart already knew what it meant to hold pain quietly. He left. To this day, I get emotional on my birthdays. I'll find myself needing space or fighting back tears I can't quite name. It's like my body remembers what my mind has learned to pack away. Becoming me. As I moved into my teens, the hiding changed. I wasn't crawling under beds or ducking into closets anymore. I was shrinking in plain sight. I learned how to wear the right smile, say the right thing, laugh at the right time. I became a master at looking fine while feeling anything but. But even in the quiet, I was building something, a quiet strength, a voice I would one day learn to use. And I was beginning to understand that roads that shaped me didn't just carry heartache. They carried grit, creativity, tenderness, and a deep understanding of what it meant to feel, what it means to feel. And that little girl who used to hide wasn't weak. She was surviving, she was watching, and she was becoming. Teen years. Messy, loud, and mine. The night of my 13th birthday was frozen in my memory like a little bubble of magic. We were living in a duplex, and my mom threw the party in our carport. Nothing fancy, but to me, it felt like a ballroom. There was a cookie cake, music, and string of lights that transformed our little space into a teenage dream. My friends danced like the world was ours, and for that night, I felt pure, unshakable joy. Even now, that night sticks with me because it reminds me something simple and true. My mom showed up big for me that birthday, just like she did for all my birthdays, even when things were hard. Her love was always there, and it came in many forms. After that year in the Richie Rich neighborhood, also known as the Westlake area of Austin, we moved north of the river where we felt more at home. It was the kind of place where single moms raised wild kids who had barely any roles, and thankfully none of us ended up in juvie. I still have friends from that Wild West chapter where guys and a few girls would duke it out in the local park after school like they were the Von Erich brothers or Sugar Ray Leonard. We had no rules, but damn, we had fun. Man, we had fun. I don't go too deep into my teen years in this book, but that doesn't mean the stories aren't there. Big hair, bad decisions, dance floors, sticky with spilled beer, late nights that smelled like sunscreen and bonfire smoke, fake IDs that fooled exactly no one, stolen beers from neighbors' fridges when we thought we were in the mood. We were hoodlums. And thank God there were no cell phones or social media, no evidence, just memories and a few hazy photographs that somehow survived. But before all that came, the summer before ninth grade, when I made one of the hardest decisions of my life, I moved in with my dad full time. My parents had divorced when I was younger, and I had always lived with my mom. She was strong, composed, whip smart, a woman who didn't need to raise her voice to make a point, but we were oil and water. Or maybe we were just mirrors too much alike in ways that rubbed each other raw. As much as I loved her, I needed something different. I started going to church, craving structure and stability, something that made sense, something that could anchor me at the time. My dad was the one who could give me. I knew it crushed her when I left to live with him. She didn't beg me to stay, but her silence was heavy with disappointment. It hung between us like a thick summer air, and I could feel it every time we locked eyes. That decision marked a turning point between us. We always loved each other, but the closeness we had once built took years to find its way back. Life with my dad was a different world. He wasn't one for long talks, but his love was steady. He was present, consistent. Our home became the go-to spot for my friends. He cooked for all of us, and then some, tossed chili bikinis into people's mouth for laughs, and took us out on his boat. Friday nights meant movie rentals, and Saturday mornings meant chocolate-covered donuts from Skaggs. That quiet care changed me. It gave me space to breathe and to just be. Freshman year, I switched to a private Christian school in South Austin. The hope was that it would keep me out of trouble. For a while, it did. I memorized the scripture, sang in chapel, and tried to do the right thing. But it didn't take long before I started feeling like I didn't belong. Not because of God. I never stopped believing in Him. It was the people, the pressure, and the way things were handled. Truth is, I didn't leave that church. I was pushed out. Or at least that's how I felt. By sophomore year, we moved back up north, and I was right back in the chaos of public school. My crew hadn't changed. We skipped class, cried over boys, made dumb choices in the backs of trucks. It was wild, it was messy, and it was mine. My sisters were woven through it all. We didn't fight because it wasn't allowed, but we had our own ways of communicating, and we always had each other's backs. We cheered, we roasted, we warned each other about deadbeat friends. There were nights we would walk into a club and the DJ or the band would yell, "The Turnell Sisters are here." The men noticed us, the women either joined us or talked about us, but we weren't mean. We let everyone in unless you crossed us. When we stood together, you didn't mess with us. One night, I'll never forget, when I was 16, I woke from a nightmare, and that shook me to my core. I hadn't remembered all my traumas yet, not fully. That wouldn't come for another 40 years. But something came through that night. I walked quietly into my dad's room, unsure if I belonged there at that age. I just needed him. I slipped under the covers, and without a word, he reached over and patted my back. Slow, gentle, and steady, that simple gesture healed something in me. It told me I was safe, loved, and seen. Looking back, those years were a mix of bruises and blessings, heartbreak and hallelujahs. I didn't realize it then, but every messy, beautiful moment was teaching me something about love, trust, and who I was becoming. I was learning what safety felt like, what it didn't, and how much strength it takes to keep choosing both grace and grit when life keeps throwing curveballs. I was far from figuring it all out, but even then, the road was already shaping me into the woman I'd one day become. I'm going to go to the back. Oh, it's just the lessons. This is it. Lessons from childhood. Trust your gut. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. That little whisper inside you is there for a reason. Listen to it, or at least proceed with caution. Imagination is a beautiful gift. It's what kept my heart and my spirit young, helping me escape when I needed to, but it can also blur reality, turning shadows into monsters, or people into saints. It's both a sanctuary and a trickster. You can have both good and tough childhood, and a tough childhood. Life isn't all black and white. Some people can wound you deeply and still hold moments of love. You can love them, but you can also protect yourself with boundaries that keep your peace intact. Outside is where all things get better. The world feels lighter under open skies. Fresh air, dirt under your feet, and a little sunshine can heal things no doctor or preacher ever could. Kids learn in all kinds of ways. I wasn't a traditional learner. They called me slow, sometimes even dumb, but I just saw the world differently. I hate very few things, but being put in a box is one of them. Maybe the things that made us different as kids weren't flaws at all. They were clues, quietly pointing us toward who we were always meant to be.